The House has directed the Speaker to make a statement at the beginning of each session about the duties and responsibilities of honourable members. I begin by reminding honourable members of their duty to observe the Code of Conduct agreed by the House and to behave with civility, fairness in all of their dealings. The Behaviour Code applies to members as it applies to others who visit or work in Parliament and provides clear guidance. Unacceptable behaviour will be dealt with seriously, independently and with effective sanctions. The House asserts its privileges of freedom of speech. That privilege is enjoyed by members of Parliament only in their work in this House, as private individuals were equal under the law with those whom we represent. It is there to ensure that our constituents can be represented by us without fear or favour. It is an obligation upon us all to exercise that privilege responsibly. The Speaker does not have the power to police the accuracy of members' contributions. Therefore, it is incumbent upon members to be accurate in the way and what they say in this House. But if a member is inaccurate by mistake, they should correct that mistake as soon as possible. Members must be mindful of the impact of what they say, not only on other members, but on others who follow our proceedings. And members should be heard courteously, whatever their views. In this place, we are honourable members, and the language we use about each other should reflect that. If a member falls short of the standards expected of us all, there are ways of dealing with that. But it's not only by accusations made as sideswipes during questions or debates. If we fail to treat each other with respect in the debate, that diminishes our work. But it also risks raising the temperature of discussions outside this place, particularly on social media, which already too often descend into online abuse against honourable members. I also wish to give some advice about seeking to speak to the Chamber. The Deputy Speakers and I take into account a number of factors when determining who to call during business, which is not balloted, and one factor we consider carefully is how often a member may speak. Jim Chandler's not with us. In other words, you have spoken much more than a colleague, then other things being equal, that a colleague is more likely to be called, or certainly more likely to be called earlier in the next debate for which you both apply. I know it can be frustrating not to be called in a debate or to be called very late. Prioritising those debates, question times, urgent questions and statements in which you seek to participate is one way of trying to avoid that happening. Now that we've started a new session, everybody's scores start at the reset button of 0. So I shall make clear that different principles apply to front benchers from the three largest parties who were nominated to speak on behalf of their parties. Staff in my office are very happy to offer further advice. Finally, I want all members and everyone in the parliamentary community to be able to go about their work safely, both online and here in Westminster. The security of this building and those who work here depends upon us all. We have a duty to be vigilant and to assist those whose job it is to maintain this place as a safe place to work. Before moving to the first business of the new session, I would like to express my very best wishes to all honourable members of all who work in this House as well. Clerk of the House. I have to acquaint the House that this House, this day, attended the Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge. The Councillors of State, acting on Her Majesty's behalf in the House of Peers, and that His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, delivered Her Majesty's most gracious speech to both Houses of Parliament on Her Majesty's behalf in pursuance of Her Majesty's commands, of which I have, for greater accuracy, obtained a copy. I shall direct the terms of the speech being printed in the votes and proceedings. Copies are already available in the vote office. Before I call the mover and the seconder, I want to announce the proposed subjects of debates during the remaining debates of the Royal Address, which are today, debate on the address; tomorrow, preventing crime and delivering justice; Thursday, fairness at work, power in the communities; Monday, making Britain the best place to grow up and grow old; Tuesday, tackling the short-term and long-term cost of living increases; Wednesday, achieving economic growth. So now I have the pleasure of first to call Graham Stuart to move, then Faye Jones to second the address. So I now call that shy retiring Graham Stuart.
I beg to move that an humble address be presented to Her Majesty as follows. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, beg leave to offer our humble thanks to Your Majesty for the gracious speech which was addressed to both Houses of Parliament. It's a great honour for me and for my constituents in Beverley and Holderness to propose the humble address, and all the more so in this Platinum Jubilee. To say that this packed chamber is intimidating and creates a certain amount of nerves, I think we can all take as read. We wish Her Majesty the best of health and thank her for her 7 decades of service to this nation. Her Majesty has demonstrated a selflessness which puts the rest of us, perhaps not least in here, to shame. The legislative agenda we are debating today must be seen within the most alarming of international contexts. Russia's unprovoked and unjustifiable attack on Ukraine has united the whole of this House in condemnation. We stand together with our friends in Ukraine, and I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, for his party's wholehearted backing of the measures to support the Ukrainians. We are providing, Mr. Speaker, rocket launchers, complete with rockets, so different from the Trident submarines that the Honourable Gentleman's party previously proposed, which were to have been built, but you will remember, never armed. Now, no one in politics, Mr. Speaker, minds being senior, but equally no one wishes to be seen as past it. Yet today I fulfil the role of the old duffer whose best days are behind him. While my honourable friend, the member for Brecon and Radnorshire, plays the part of the up-and-coming talent. The Chief Whip certainly made the right decision with the latter choice, as we shall soon hear. But given my part today, Mr. Speaker, I thought I'd dispense some advice, both to those seeking to enter Parliament and young thrusters who are already here, many of whom elected as long as 2 years ago. And you know who you are. Can't believe that you're still not in the cabinet. Mr. Speaker, some of us are here for a long time, some for a short time, and some, according to our media friends, for a good time. So, for the candidates, my advice is keep going and realise how much simply comes down to luck. When I applied to Beverley and Holderness Conservative Association, the senior officers had already decided who they were going to have as their candidate. none other than their then Member of the European Parliament, who wouldn't be able to continue in that role, the now Right Honourable Member for Scarborough and Whitley. After I won that selection, by 2 votes, 2 elderly lady members congratulated me. They told me they had voted for me. And the first one said, "You spoke very well, Mr. Stuart." "Thank you," I said. And the other one came in, "Yes, but Robert Goodwill, he was brilliant." To which the other replied, "But he's got a job already." Robert, of course, won selection in Scarborough. He then went on to overturn Laurie Quinn's, a 3,500 majority, and was, I think, along with my honourable friend, the member for Shipley, the only Conservative candidate in the whole of the north of England to take a seat from the Labour Party at that election. Yeah. The Leader of the Opposition must wish it was so today. Instead, the only thing opening up for him in the north is a police investigation. Now, some months after the election, I met a member of my association's executive committee, and he actually congratulated me and said that he was glad that I had been selected as the candidate after all. I thought at last my hard work was being recognised. And he added, because he said, "Because you'd have never won Scarborough." My constituency of Beverley and Holderness comprises 4 towns: Beverley, Hornsey, Withensea and Heddon, and many other hamlets and villages which are dotted across East Yorkshire. It's a beautiful part of the world and has history as well as charm. Beverley has contributed more than most places to the improvement of our democratic system over the years. Admittedly, Mr. Speaker, chiefly by running elections in such a corrupt manner that the law had to be changed after the unseating of the victorious candidate in 1727 by petition. His agents were imprisoned and Parliament passed a whole new Bribery Act. But, Mr. Speaker, Beverley's notorious freemen were not to be put off so easily. Beverley continued to be a byword for electoral malpractice. The novelist Anthony Trollope stood in the Liberal interest unsuccessfully in 1868, and such was the level of wrongdoing that a royal commission was established especially, and a new law passed, disenfranchising the town and barring it from ever returning a Member of Parliament.
Happy days.
Obviously, the law did change. Free beer and cash inducements were the electoral controversies then, rather than, say, beer and curry today. Never, Mr. Speaker, never in the history of human conflict has so much karma come from a corner. I said I would provide some advice for our up-and-coming parliamentarians. When I arrived here, I was just about wise enough to back the winner of the leadership contest that summer, David Cameron. What I wasn't wise enough to do, Mr. Speaker, was stop telling him every way in which I thought he was going wrong. And I do mean every way. Which, funnily enough, resulted in an 11-year wait to be asked to go onto the front bench, which only came when he'd stepped down. Now, it may be that my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, saw merit where her predecessor did not. But more likely it was just that she'd seen a lot less of me. So, lesson one for the up-and-coming. Don't make an enemy of your party leader. But there is, of course, more to this place than the front bench. In my first term, community hospitals were being closed in swathes right across the country. And all three in my constituency were lined up for the chop. Now, having led marches and demonstrations in all the towns across my constituency, it became obvious that the problem would not be solved locally. So I set up a campaign group, Chart, Community Hospitals Acting Nationally Together. And along with my deputy chairman, the then member for Henley, we recruited colleagues from right across this House. We waged guerrilla warfare on Labour's health department, breaking the record for the number of petitions presented in one day in this House. We held a rally outside this place with hundreds of people and banners and placards galore. David Cameron spoke, Labour MPs spoke. My deputy, I remember, gave a rousing speech and, so carried away with the righteousness of our cause, called on everyone to join us on a march to Parliament Square. So it was, Mr. Speaker, that our now Prime Minister found himself being intercepted by a police inspector who told him no permission existed for such a march and that we must go back. So I think there are two lessons here. Never stop campaigning for what you believe in, and having marched your troops to the top of the hill, never be afraid to march them down again if circumstances necessitate. Now, when the call did come, I was lucky enough to go into the Whip's office, the only communal playpen in Westminster, aside from the creche. Being there made me realise how little I knew after 11 years here, because as a Whip, you learn a lot. So that's another lesson. Join the Whip's office if you are asked. Now, given my position, I'd like to tell you that being in government, isn't all it's cracked up to be. But actually, it is. I served both my right honourable friend, the member for North Somerset, and my right honourable friend, the member for South West Norfolk, as Secretaries of State for the Department for International Trade. Both were exceptional. They were tireless and demanding, but delivered outcomes from a new department which no one thought was possible. So, young thrusters, enjoy any department you're in and value it for itself, not just as a stepping stone to something else. After all, as I discovered last September, you never know when you'll prematurely be on the backbenches. Today's Queen's speech unveils a substantial legislative programme under four main headings: boosting economic growth and helping with the cost of living, making our streets safer, funding the NHS and tackling the backlog, and providing leadership in troubled times. To pick out one item, if I may, Mr. Speaker, the energy bill is of particular importance to my constituents. It'll make possible the development of hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, for which I expect the Humber not only to be a national leader, but actually a global leader in their development. Taking us to net zero, but also giving us energy security and huge export potential. So the Conservative Party, under the leadership of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has work to do. We were elected to deliver our manifesto and level up the United Kingdom, and that is what we will do. Despite the human weakness which is all too present in this place, I believe nearly everyone here is in politics for the right reasons, and that elected public service continues to be a noble calling. So I hope that potential candidates from all sides will continue to come forward, that young thrusters will show ambition for their country as well as for themselves, and that as we fire legislative bullets at the challenges that face us, we will take aim in this Platinum Jubilee year and, like our Ukrainian friends, say with total conviction, God save the Queen. I commend the gracious speech to this House.
Can I call Faye Jones to second?
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Speaker. It is a real honour to be asked to second the gracious speech this afternoon, and an even greater one to follow my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness. His was a pitch-perfect speech, an exemplar of how to do it, and one which I feel undermined his status as a self-confessed old duffer. Now, members with more experience than I have seen many state openings, but this year's is undoubtedly special. Even despite Her Majesty's absence this morning, the Platinum Jubilee is a lasting reminder of the Queen's immense devotion to duty. Yeah. And I know everyone in this House wishes Her Majesty a speedy recovery. Yeah. Now, this time last year, at last year's Queen's speech, I sat up in the gallery as seats in this chamber were especially limited because of the COVID regulations. And as I watched my good friend, the Honourable Member for South Ribble, get to her feet, I remember thinking to myself, all the best, Fletch, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes right now. But karma comes at you fast, doesn't it, Chief Whip? But unlike my northern friend, I have the honour of addressing a packed chamber with faces free of the burden of face masks. Now, as much as I loathed wearing a face mask in the chamber, they certainly helped me by hiding the looks of disinterest and abject boredom whenever I got up to speak. So I'm afraid this year the cameras are on, so at least try and look as though you're enjoying this. Now, on being asked to do this, I turn to some trusted friends and colleagues for advice. The Right Honourable... All in good time, Deputy, all in good time. The Right Honourable Member for South Swindon's instant...
It's your fault.
Yeah. His instant reaction was, oh my God, love, you better be funny. The Honourable Member for the Cities of London and Westminster told me I would be a total mess. And even my dad, a former member and my inspiration in many ways, said after yesterday's rehearsal, well, you're going to have to tell the jokes better than that. So, Mr. Speaker, that's actually better feedback than he gave me at the start of my political career at my count in 2019. The result had been declared, and I took to the podium to make my acceptance speech. My mum was beaming in the front row, and I saw my dad move to the back of the hall, presumably to get a better view or to take a photograph. But just a minute or so into my speech, Dad had had enough, and he gave me the wind-it-up signal. So with friends like those, I ran straight for the warm embrace of the House of Commons Library. There I discovered that I am the 7th member from Wales to have taken part in the Loyal Address since 1874. I am the first woman from Wales and the first Conservative from Wales. But I am very proud to say that my constituents in Brecon and Radnorshire have a long association with the Loyal Address. In 1975, one of my predecessors, Cwm Roderick, a senior figure in the Labour Party, proposed the speech. As members will know, Brecon and Radnorshire is 2/3 of the historic county of Powys. And so with a proposer and now a seconder coming from the undisputed better half of the county, I wonder how my honourable friend from Montgomeryshire feels this afternoon, knowing that he is neither the has-been nor the will be. Withdraw that, Mr. Speaker. However, that I have even been asked to give this speech today is a surprise to many, most of all myself. I was always afraid that I had torpedoed my political career long before it even began. In 2005, when I was at university, I shared a flat with a friend who was working on the campaign to make my right honourable friend for Halton Price and Howden the Conservative Party leader. It was suggested to myself and a few friends that wearing a pink T-shirt which said "It's DD for me," would go down a storm at party conference. Turns out it did. Sorry, David. So 14 years later, when I was asked at my selection meeting for Brecon and Radnorshire, have you ever done anything to embarrass the Conservative Party? I had to say yes. I was later asked what I had learned from the incident. I said that I don't look good in pink. Now, today is a proud day for my constituency and my family. Apart from stints in London for university and working in Europe, I have lived my whole life in Wales, raised in a firmly Conservative household. And I think being a Conservative in Wales has helped me develop the thick skin which I hope will get me through today. Certainly helped after last week's results anyway. In 2019, my honourable friends, the member for Wrexham, Ynys Môn and I, became the first 3 women to be elected to the Conservative benches representing Welsh constituencies. I like to think that the 3 of us were worth the 100-year wait. But while we have some difficult questions to answer and challenges to meet on the treatment of women in this place, it is imperative that we do not put anyone off becoming a Member of Parliament. Yes, the House of Commons is a strange place to work, and yes, sometimes some people don't realise that they are part of the problem. But despite that, here is a place where women achieve great things. It was a woman who introduced the Autism Act, the late and much missed across this House member for Cheshire and Amersham. It was a woman who delivered the Children's Funeral Fund and continues to be a pain in the government's neck on hormone replacement therapy. The member for Swansea East, who I'm sorry to see is not in her place today. It was a woman who secured inclusion in today's gracious speech that the government will licence pedicabs right across the cities of London and Westminster for the very first time. No guessing, no prizes for who that was. And it was a woman, long before my time, who stood up to the might of the unions, empowered council tenants to buy their homes, and 40 years ago this year protected the Falkland Islands. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that we say today a woman's place is in the House of Commons. And by the way, it was also a woman who got 20 million quid out of the Treasury for the Global Centre of Rail Excellence, made cyber flashing a criminal offence, and got the MOD to scrap the closure of Brecon Barracks. Just saying. As much as we must attract more women to this place, we must do our utmost to attract wide-ranging talents so that our benches are filled with the plain-speaking common sense of the Honourable Member for Ashfield, the distinguished professional experience of the Member for Newbury, and dare I even say it, the political diplomacy of the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North, Hidsgrove. Mr. Speaker, my Liberal Democrat opponents tell me that all I do is talk about farming and the military. So today I will keep them happy and do exactly that. During my maiden speech, I said I felt I had won first prize in the lottery of life by becoming the member for Brecon and Radnorshire. That's as true today as it was then. It's a glorious part of the world, stretching from the upper Swansea Valley to just outside Ludlow. It is kept thriving by thousands of farmers, not trustafarian farmers who inherit their wealth, but the ordinary, mud under the fingernail, grafting farmer who works year-round to put food on our plates and to give their kids a future. Yeah. The cost of living crisis is having a particular effect in rural areas. Costs of fuel and fertiliser are eye-watering, and this presents a real risk to our ability to feed ourselves. It is deeply tragic that it has taken war in Ukraine for us to focus on UK food security. If I do anything in this place, it will be to bang on about the importance of farming to this country. Hence why I welcome the measures in the gracious address, which will see British produce on tables around the world. And even the online safety bill, which will protect the unsuspecting farmer from nefarious internet videos. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you walk down the Watton in Brecon, as I know you have, you will see 24 trees honouring 24th the Foot, better known as the South Wales Borderers, who fought at the Battle of Rorke's Drift, made iconic in the film Zulu. Whether Brecon Barracks, Sennybridge Training Area, or the Navy's Outdoor Leadership Training Centre in Talabont, my constituency is extremely proud of its military footprint. We are also home to the Cambrian Patrol, the Olympic gold medal in infantry training, a 60-kilometre march for teams of 8 over just 48 hours. Now, I know he will be far too modest to tell you himself, but the Secretary of State for Wales is in fact a finisher of that event. So modest was he, so keen to keep his light under a bushel, that when we visited the Cambrian Patrol back in October, he brought his finisher's certificate along with him. And put it out on Twitter. It was dated 1987. I took great joy in pointing out that I was 2 years old at the time, and great joy recounting it again now. Over the years, many wrongs have been done to military veterans, and I applaud the efforts of those right across this House to correct that. The Honourable Member for Barnsley Central has led his benches in that effort. And on this side, my honourable friends for Plymouth Moorview and Wrexham have spoken for male and female veterans in ways few can match. And so on behalf of the many veterans I represent, particularly those who served in Northern Ireland and tell me they have been frightened of opening the post for decades, I warmly welcome the inclusion of the Legacy Bill in today's gracious speech. So, Mr. Speaker, let me conclude my seconding of the Loyal Address and give way to the Leader of the Opposition. I know we are all delighted he has not cancelled this afternoon's speech. I warmly welcome it on behalf of my constituents. Today's Queen's speech contains a commitment to right the historic imbalance that has pervaded this country for too long and level up all four corners of the United Kingdom. It offers leadership in turbulent times and looks to the long term, ironing out our challenges of food and energy security, and makes best use of our newfound legislative freedoms. It helps this country stand tall on the world stage, as it has done for so long, and it is my honour to commend this gracious speech to the House.
The question is that an honourable address be presented to Her Majesty as follows. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, beg leave to offer our humble thanks to Your Majesty for the gracious speech which was addressed to both Houses of Parliament. I now call the Right Honourable Keir Starmer, the Leader